Welcome to Commander Pop Culture, a place to gather magical information with some laughs, might I add. Hello, welcome to Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Spoilers. You're here to find out how these cards can fit in your decks, so we're gonna get started. First off, we have Fori Vault. It's a mythic land. You can tap it to add one colorless, tap 3 in it, discard a card, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of artifacts you control. Put one of them in your hand, the others in the bottom of your deck in random order. The card you discard replaces itself with something that you get to dig really deep.
Go deep! I can reach it! Go deep!
If you're in an artifact strategy, I imagine that's pretty far down into your library. Because you're tapping this and 3 other sources of ramp, you're effectively investing 4 mana production. I imagine by the time you get to activate this, it's mid to late game, and you should have a nicely developed board in terms of quantity of artifacts, and hopefully you find what you're looking for, because that's a pretty sweet ability. Ancient Cornucopia. Whenever you cast a spell that's 1 or more colors, you gain 1 life for each of the spell's colors. It only happens once a turn, so that's a little bit of a bummer. It also taps for mana of any color. I prefer my mana production to be a 2 mana or less investment, so already kind of pushing it a little bit with this card. And then to sadly have a ceiling of it only happening once a turn is a bit of a bummer. You would only be able to take real advantage of this if you're playing things at instant speed. I kind of personally would play any other rock over this. Generous Plunderer. On upkeep, you may create a treasure token. If you do, target opponent creates a tapped treasure token. Whenever it attacks, it deals damage to a defending player equal to the number of artifacts they control. The upkeep trigger, it's nice because the other person you're giving the treasure token to doesn't have to be the person you're attacking with this. So you could just give it to the person that's at the bottom of the totem pole in your commander games, and then you won't have to worry as much about hooking people up with mana. The bottom ability does care about who you're hitting. I imagine decks that run a lot of artifact strategies aren't producing a whole terrible amount of artifact creatures, so the menace might be good enough to consistently get that evasion and punch people. It's a cool card for, I guess, punishing artifact strategies. Definitely a niche pick if you know your play group and you want to play some metagame kind of stuff. Tarnation Vista. On ETB, enters tap, choose a color. Tap to add mana equal to first chosen color, and then tap 1 in it to, for each color among monocolored permanents you control, add 1 of that color. Be minimally playing a 3-colored commander deck in order to get a mana investment return on this card, or at least for you to net mana. You should only be played in 3 or more color decks, and then at that point, I don't know if you want to tap land, but has a decent floor, but not the greatest of ceilings either. Harvester of Misery. ETB, all creatures get -2/-2 till end of turn, and then you could discard it from your hand for 2 mana to do that to a target creature. I've been playing the new Massacre Girl. This would be a nice fit in that deck. I don't know how much this is going to cost monetary value, because it's going to be a mythic, but I don't see this card seeing a whole lot of play, so maybe it'll fit within my budget constraints. If you don't know, I build a lot of budget decks on the channel, and that's so my viewers and my subscribers can afford to build them themselves. Magic's an expensive hobby, thus I try to mitigate that as much as possible for everybody. Hostile Investigator. On ETB, target opponent discards card, and then whenever 1 or more players discard 1 or more cards, investigate. The ability only triggers once a turn. Because you have that limitation, you want to put cards in your deck that cause people to discard every turn. So Oppression, you want to play things like Bottomless Pit, and there's at least a handful more of these black enchantments that make people discard on their turns, and then you get to investigate off of it and maximize the bottom trigger as much as possible. Sandstorm Retriever for the free mana. It's a creature. I need to make a 3/3 golem, and then for 2 mana tapping it, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each token you control, and then they gain trample till end of turn. I feel like these cards that put in golems, they minimally cost 3 mana. However, the one that puts in a 3/3 golem and gives trample costs at least 5. So you're saving costs, and it's kind of like this card
Split the difference, of course!
if you know what I mean, because obviously it's a 3-drop, but it has a 2 mana investment, and then you could scale up your tokens, which means you don't have to be strictly playing just a golem deck. You could be just playing a token deck and getting some decent value out of that bottom ability. The bigger theme is token decks will appreciate this, and then followed by the golem decks. I feel like golem decks are very fringe. Lost Jete. Whenever equipped creature deals damage, put a charge counter on it. You can remove a charge counter to untap a land. Target creature can't block this turn, or you can put a counter on equipped creature. Just like its previous iteration, it triggers on damage. So you could, per revolution of the table, put on 4 counters on this if people are going to attack you and you have this available to block. I don't think it's as good, but to make up the difference, they decrease the cost of this on both payment and equipped. I think you make it up, and the abilities are decent enough. Greeny Gamble. On ETB, you get to draw 3 cards, gain 6 life, create 3 bat tokens, and then at the beginning of your end step, you discard a card, lose 2 life, and sack creature. You basically lose a third of the investment, and when it leaves the battlefield, you discard 3, lose 6, and sack 3 creatures, so you basically lose out on the entire investment of the TV trigger. I think you want to play this in aristocrat strategies because you don't care so much about the middle or the bottom triggers. You want density on your cards, and you're making a lot of bodies off this. And if you dump your hand before this enchantment leaves the battlefield, you'll effectively get maximum value from this thing. Not a bad deal. Life's a tool or a resource. You should use it. I wouldn't concern yourself too much about the middle and the bottom ability too terribly much. Maybe flickering decks don't mind this card so much because you're still going 3 cards deep on ETB, and then on the discard trigger of it leaving, it gives you card selection. So you just keep the best X cards and then get rid of the 3, kind of like a brainstorm-esque effect. Not bad. Bristlebud Farmer. Trample on ETB, make 2 foods, and then when it attacks, you could sack a food if you do mill 3, and then put a permanent from among them onto your hand. At its worst, you run out of food, and you just have a solid body for a cheap investment. But if not, I like the recursion piece. A relatively safe body. Like, it'll be hard to kill. You'll probably get multiple triggers, at least maximum of 2 for some unique card advantage. Collector's Cage. Hideaway 5, and then for 1 mana investment tapping, you put a counter on target creature control. If there are 3 more creatures with different powers, essentially the Coven mechanic, you may play the exile card without paying its mana cost. I would play this in my Brago deck. I think this is one of the easiest hideaway triggers in the game to pull off. Looking 5 cards deep is also really nice. And then on top of that, you get to play that thing for free if you meet the activation requirement of this thing. Really nice, solid white card.
Nice and easy. I like it.
Molten Duplication for a 2 mana sorcery. You get this one-off effect where you get to create a token copy of a artifact or creature, and then you sack it at the beginning of your next end step. I like the cheapness of this card, and then I also like the flexibility and that you could target either an artifact or a creature. Normally it's just a creature. Decks that may want this is Obeka, the original one, because you could end your turn and nullify these end step triggers. If you don't necessarily care about that stuff or sundial effects, then just get a nice body in return for a cheap investment. If you're able to copy this or return it from your graveyard consistently, this would be a good like dockside extortionist. Just make a ton of mana. I don't know what all other applications. There's probably plenty of other terrible artifacts and creatures that exist in Magic for you to copy. And if you don't care about losing it on end step, this is a card for you. That brings us to the end. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked what you saw, subscribe. I do plenty of other stuff other than spoiler reviews, and I look forward to building decks around some of my favorite commanders that I saw from this spoiler season. I'm going to feature them on the channel when it releases on the 19th. I hope you had a great time. Everyone take care now. Bye.